And I think we felt the person that is going to use some form of time leap to time traveling ability in this series after witnessing what I saw in this episode of Charlotte. So, I'm just going to point out a couple things after watching this episode that was just way too obvious. It could have been the translations, or it could have been something else, but there was some dialogue in this episode of Charlotte with the blind singer. With her dialogue, she acted like time didn't really matter. Like, she was willing to spend her entire day going with you and going to see this random people she's never seen before. She's like, oh, don't worry, it doesn't matter. I have all the time in the world and all that. They'll understand. And some of the dialogue that was used with her, the way she expressed that, and the way she kind of knew what was going on, and all that, like how humans only have one life, that's what she said, it made me assume that this person has some form of ability, because the way it was hinting at this entire episode, this girl knows a lot more than she's letting on. Definitely. So, I'm just going to place my bets here after watching this episode of Charlotte. That girl, the blind girl in this episode, is either A, she's going to be the user that uses some form of time-traveling ability to save the sister, the little sister, that died, or B, she's going to be connected to someone that can use some form of time travel. That's what's probably going to happen, judging by the way some of the dialogue was done in this episode. Not very subtle, so to say. It was kind of very fucking obvious. I mean, anyone could see how the dialogue was kind of pointing towards that the way she was acting. But still, she's either A, she is the user of some form of time ability, or B, she is connected to someone. In a discussion right there, because I feel like that was too obvious to me. Besides that, now this episode focuses on two different segments. First half of the episode was Yusarin, and to be honest with you, it was very, very dull, so to say, compared to last week's episode, because if you look at last week's episode, that was just fucking amazing, and probably one of the best high points of the series. I don't think really anything is going to reach that level of last week's episode until probably the final episode of the series of Charlotte. So I didn't really expect that type of quality episode this week because, I mean, like I said, last week's episode was just stunning. One of the best episodes of this anime season, and so I didn't expect to see another episode like that this week's episode. However, I do expect some form of episode similar to that for the finale of Charlotte, but that is still a little bit ways off. So getting on to the point, the first half of the episode is Yusarin and kind of building up for the second half, and personally, I'm just not a big fan of Yusarin's comedy. I'm not. I mean, comedy is subjective. It depends on what type of comedy you like, but I've seen that comedy skit so many times in the past couple episodes, like almost every single episode besides last week's episode, since Yusarin's been introduced, is Yusarin's always had this comedy skit to where she gets, you know, like Yusarin, and dancing, or different type of shit. Just, you know, the stuff we have seen from her character, and so the first half of the episode, I'm like, meh, it's like, meh. And I mean, you could kind of consider it a little bit of a fillerish to set up for the second half. Now, the second half is where a majority of this conversation of this review is going to be about, because like I said, first half was just, yeah. So, second half of Charlotte this week. We get introduced to a new character that is, ironically, the singer that Yu is going to be going to visit the next day after, and we get to see kind of the voice behind the band. And the voice, very beautiful. I have to say, the voice actor of this girl that was introduced in this episode is very decent. Like, the voice acting to the singing, very good. If that is actually the same person singing and voice acting at the exact same time, that's pretty damn good. That's impressive. Really is. Because, I mean, to voice act and also to sing on top of that, that's really cool. Because that voice was really nice with the song in this week's episode. Especially the English, actually. I mean, they were actually singing in English, and it didn't sound as bad as some of the things I've seen, for instance, from Studio Mappa, that has some cringe-worthy English sometimes, and so to see how the English that she was singing in this episode, it wasn't that bad. I mean, I could still tell it was, you know, English, but not as bad as some things I've seen, so it's pretty damn decent. But back on point, the second half, though, has it where Yu is reflecting on the past and how he's realizing he needs to change up his daily life, because he can no longer go home and expect to have cooked meals for him. I mean, his sister's dead, and every time we saw him with his little sister in the past couple episodes, she always had that, you know, secret pizza sauce that she turned into on the table and ready for him to eat, and now that he can't go there and have pizza sauce, well, he's got to go out to eat or do something else for his own self. And that kind of leads into where he starts, feeling depressed because he needs to get used to probably either A, eating out or cooking for himself when he gets home. And it definitely changes up the dynamic of how he really looks at life now because he realizes how much his sister has actually helped him before she died. And, episode of Charlotte this week, it was okay. It was definitely okay. It definitely was not as high quality as last week's episode, but as I already stated, I don't expect majority of episodes from Charlotte to reach that level, so you take it how you leave it. Overall, though, Charlotte, it was okay. It's fun. It's set up for the future with some very unsubtle time travel mechanics that's going to be taking place, and that's about it. How do you feel about Nal's brother actually becoming sane again, not really crazy anymore? How do y'all feel about that? I also feel like that has something to do with an ability that this girl has. Maybe she could reset time on a person. Like, maybe it's not in a sense of resetting time, like, I guess, going back in time. What if she could reset time on certain objects? Or people? Maybe she kind of looked at his brain and reset his mind back a little bit until he wasn't as insane. That is a good possibility if you think about it. Maybe she could just revert time on a certain individual object instead of affecting the entire world. But that's about it. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. You all have a wonderful day or nights wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.